Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Tanner Yarro, CEO of Yarro Studios, a toy and game maker that has raised over $2 million on Kickstarter, has 2 utility patents in the gaming world, and has sold and licensed toys and games all over the world. Tanner, welcome to the Binge. How you doing?
James, super awesome. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here. We got their times worked out, and short apologies for anybody that is was hoping to get this an hour earlier. We got the schedule changed, so I actually think more people even jumped in than we originally had scheduled. So it actually worked out to the best. And I just have to say that Tanner's got a kid on the way. So you know what? When you've got hospital appointments and things like that, something like the Binge is a mild thought compared to the important stuff in life. So I'm glad everything worked out and things are going great. Let me start off just by saying congratulations. This is it must be a wonderful feeling having fatherhood around the corner.
Yeah, you know, it's weird. It definitely feels like everybody should care that it's the most important thing ever happening. Because obviously it is to you.
Yeah.
But I'm in Utah, which is the Latter-day Saint Mormon community. And most people around here are on their 8th or 9th kids. So it's really not that big of a deal. But for us, it's super life-changing, man. The first one really causes you to buckle down and keep doing Kickstarters. We pushed our Kickstarter forward because the kid was coming and my wife was like, you know, it's like $5,000 to have a baby. And I was like, let's move the Kickstarter up. So there's other reasons, but
classic saying, baby needs a new pair of shoes, right? So
yeah, there you go.
So I just want to start off by saying for people that don't know about your company, you've done 2 Kickstarters so far. I know you got another one coming up that we're going to be talking about shortly on this actual issue of the podcast. You've raised, I'm going to put this in Canadian dollars just because it always sounds bigger, $1.5 million across 2 campaigns, which is just phenomenal. And what I thought was really amazing was when I look at the backer count on that first campaign, you hit over 16,000 backers. Like that is a huge number. How did that feel when that all came together? Like, was it expected, or is it something that kind of caught you off guard, or?
It was not expected. So just to give you a little brief history, the D&D stuff is fairly new for me. So, and
Really?
we can get into that
Wow.
a little bit later, but I've been part of the toy and game world for 5 or 6 years now. And I've been a part of 3 or 4 Kickstarters, never managing the Kickstarter, kind of graphic design help or product dev help, and kind of let the marketing guys handle the Kickstarter side. And I honestly, if you were to ask me 2 years ago if you could make money on Kickstarter, I would have said no. I for a long time told everybody that you need to kind of just chalk it up as a marketing tool.
Yeah.
And with the first foray into the D&D stuff was that first map book with the 16,000 backers, and the whole campaign cost me $1,000. And
Wow.
wasn't a thing 3 months before I clicked launch. So it was an idea 3 months before launch. And I kind of was expecting like $50,000 and was expecting to spend about that in ads and marketing and just kind of watching it as it went. And it went gangbusters. What's even more funny is I was dating my now wife at the time 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And her dad is a lawyer, and the first time I met him, he was like, I don't understand what you do. Like, you want to make stuff for dragon game?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. And that was the first time I met her family, and my Kickstarter launched a week later, and then it hit like $500,000 in the first 15 days, and her parents were like all of a sudden really cool with it. And I don't give them enough credit. Yeah. The next time I went out there, they were all way more interested in learning about Dungeons and Dragons, but I throw them under the bus with that comment. They've been supportive since day one. So
that's incredible. Now, were you like, I know it was like the idea of creating this book, and I'll share my screen in a second for people watching so they can see it. Was but were you playing Dungeons and Dragons for years before that? So you're new into the creation of a Kickstarter campaign for a product in that area, but were you an avid Dungeons and Dragons or D&D player or?
No, so my really brief history starts about 10 years ago. I had just returned from an LDS mission, one of those white shirt name tags in Argentina. So I lived in Argentina for 2 years. I got back and knew I wanted to do something. And my first little venture was action cameras. So this was about 10 years ago. I did an action camera to compete with GoPro and wanted to sell it to kids, kind of be like the kids version of the action camera. 10 years later, I had done, I loved building toys and products. I loved going to New York Toy Fair, and I loved, the Toys R Us was still around when I was doing this, and ended up developing an inflatable fort, which was our first kind of foray into Kickstarter.
That's cool.
The inflatable fort did $69,000. It's called Fortsy, Fortsy, and it cost us about 100 grand. So we were in crazy debt. It was me and a buddy of mine whose background was in manufacturing. I ended up sneaking into Chicago Toy and Game Show, and I was running around and setting up the inflatable fort and then taking it down because that was kind of the cool part of it. We ended up selling it to a company out of Florida who covered all our debt. I then developed this toy right here, which is called Glowbots. This is the first patent that I got. It's a 3-dimensional light bright. So my utility patent is on any 3-dimensional light emitting object. So these pegs come out. And so here I made the Mandalorian. I have a Borat right here. And this one's plugged in so you can see it lit up. I'll just, let's see, pan it over. Oh, it's super bright.
Now the characters, can you make any character, or is it just like a standard kind of, for the people listening that can't see, he held up almost looked like a little mini Mandalorian toy that was lit up. So kind of like a light bright, you can pull the pieces off and create kind of any creature you want, almost like a light bright meets Mr. Potato Head, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's like if Light Bright and Funko Pop vinyls, those collectible
Pop
figures, had a baby. I ended up licensing that to DC, and then COVID and everything, we've had a number of setbacks, but fingers crossed that should launch this Christmas. I did that with another board game for kids called Build or Boom. That one and Glowbots, I licensed to Goliath Games. So Goliath is they're like the Hasbro of Europe.
Okay.
So they're the biggest outside of the US. They still have quite a big foothold in the US. If you've heard of like Gooey Louie, where you pull the boogers out of the nose.
Yep.
And Pop the Pig is some of their big ones.
Sure.
So licensed those two and started playing Dungeons and Dragons at about that time. I hope I don't get pegged as a poser. I feel like in the 60s and 70s, it was kind of gatekept a little bit, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
But I love how open and inviting the community is now. And so I actually met my group at a comic book store. I went with nobody. I didn't have any friends that were into it. My friends were all the football kids in high school.
Yeah.
So I kind of went by myself. I met a group. They adopted me. I played for about 1.5 years and was so sick of drawing the maps. And I was like, does something like this exist, like a book? And they're like, no. And so like 2 months later, 3 months later, it was up on Kickstarter, and just, it really exploded when we met Green Inbox, who connected me and you.
Yes, Aaron. Yeah, we interviewed him a couple months ago, actually.
Yeah, I watched that. That was a good interview. They're very good at what they do. That's for sure.
So was that one of the key things that got you to really kind of take off and explode, was once Green Inbox got involved with helping with the social media boosting, I guess I would say, or optimization?
You know, it did. The campaign was sitting at about $500,000 with like 7 days left. And I got an email from an Israeli guy asking me to wire him $5,000 to Israel. And that never would have happened in any of my past companies, because I'd built these teams of 5 or 6 people. And so I had like this board, and both the games that I licensed, I've hardly seen a dime from, because we make a royalty and then it splits between 6 people.
I got you.
So with this Kickstarter project, it was just me. And I was like, well, the Kickstarters made that money. I could, float $5,000 and see what happens. And nobody was there to be like, you don't just send $5,000 to an Israeli prince. And Iran connected me to one of the guys that he did a board game for, and that's all it really took for me to be like, okay, let's try it. And then Green Inbox did like $100,000 a day for the next 5 days.
So that was off a base of $500,000. So how'd you get to the $500,000 in the first place? Like, what got you there?
So there were a couple things that I did differently on this one that I saw. Again, I was a part of 2 or 3 Kickstarters before this.
Okay.
So there were things that I saw that worked and things that I saw that didn't work.
Such as?
And a bunch of the things that didn't work were trying to drum up excitement without having a real product market fit. So for example, the earlier Kickstarter that I was a part of was the Fortsy. And it just wasn't the product market fit for Kickstarter. It was a really cool product, but it was made for kids that were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And those aren't the people on Kickstarter. And so a lot of our money spent before that launch was on educating the consumer how to use Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And 95% of every single backer that we had were first-time Kickstarter users. And so we were never going to see the snowball effect with that campaign. And since then, I've met with 50 other people who are like, help me do this Kickstarter. And I've just been like, look, don't do stuff for kids on Kickstarter. You want to be a good product market fit. And that is, Kickstarter demographics are mostly male, but that gap is shortening between the ages of 18 and 35. And they're buying board games and new technology. So I tell that to a lot of people. If it's a product made for women, there's a million other ways to launch, and that doesn't mean it's not going to be a good product, but I don't know if that's the perfect product market fit for Kickstarter. And you end up just wasting money trying to educate the consumer on this platform, when if you can have a product that fits the current ecosystem on Kickstarter, you can start the snowball effect. So with the map book, for example, it was such a perfect product market fit where it was D&D, which is super popular. It was a board game, which is big on Kickstarter. It was innovative. And then we were the #1 page on trending and popular for 25 of the 30 days that we were on Kickstarter.
Wow.
So that was some of the things that didn't work and some of the things that did work. Some of the things that did work were you can't really do this anymore. And I'm kind of looking for a new way to do this, but I built an Instagram account from 0 to 15,000 followers in like 3 months.
And so one thing I saw on one of your campaign pages, I think it was the first one, where you had one of your stretch goals was a social stretch goal, which I've seen some Kickstarters now do, where they'll say, hey, if I can hit so many followers or get so many shares, so many likes, we're going to release another stretch target that everybody will benefit from. Was it linking it into your page that helped you grow that, or did you use other mechanisms to grow that following?
Yeah, so I probably did something really stupid, and I kind of got ripped apart for it.
You did something right. Let me just say that, because you hit some pretty big numbers. Yeah.
Well, I'm totally for social stretch goals. I didn't do it on my last campaign, and it hurt for sure. On the first campaign, I said some social stretch goals like tag Matt Mercer, who is the guy in D&D. And I had tons of people being like, can we stop harassing poor Matt Mercer? But he's like a celebrity with like 8 million followers. And I was like, it doesn't matter if 100 people tag him. He was tagged like 3,000 times during our campaign.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm pretty sure he saw the product, and there was a lot of people that came from tagging Matt Mercer. Another one that really helped is I just had people share our ads. So our main video ad of the product was shared 7,000 times, which is just insane.
How'd you
And
get people to share it? Was that part of your stretch goal? Was it?
that was social stretch goals. Yeah. Share the ad. And every time we hit a threshold of shared ads, I would add a new map to the book. So we started with 25 maps, and I think the book launched with 32 maps.
How many maps did you have drawn before you launched?
One.
So you're going as you're going.
Part.
Wow.
Yeah. It really was bad and good. So if I can explain, I launched totally underprepared. I launched without any assets. Iran was getting after me because I didn't have photography. I went to the college down the street, Utah Valley University, and I had them print me the one map that I paid for from this guy artist in Singapore, and then I coil bound it. And I just had them print the same map like 30 times. So then I coil bound that, and I used that to build the Instagram, and I collected Facebook Messenger subscribers via this software called Manychat. Have you ever had anybody on the show talk about Manychat?
No.
Manychat is essentially MailChimp for Facebook Messenger.
So is that many or mini? Can you spell that?
Manychat. It allows you to do subscription blasts similar to MailChimp via Facebook Messenger. So every time somebody clicked on my Instagram page, which was just Dungeons and Dragons memes, I auto sent them a message that said, check out this map book coming soon. Click here to subscribe to be notified via Facebook. And in 3 months, I had 15,000 followers on Instagram and collected 1,000 people ready to know more about the product before I ever launched. Now, and that was, I think, totally key. One thing that I think I've done very well is build a solid community.
Yeah, clearly with that many backers, I mean, there's clear that you've got a community. I want to share really quickly for the people watching. What your second campaign was this Infinity map. Is it how you say Infinity map or Infinity Dungeon map? Or basically an infinite map that just goes for it. So it's a scroll that as you unroll it, the map you're basically exposing parts of this map, right? And this thing's like 40 feet long.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's yeah.
When you launched that, which again, huge success, were you then tapping into that same audience that you built on the first go around, or were you taking some of these same tactics you did the first time around and hitting them again on the second wave? Or?
Yeah. So here's what's crazy. So that first campaign, I collected all those followers. I launched it. It just started to snowball. Good product market fit. Just blew up gangbusters. 16,000 backers. Mm-hmm. This one was about a year later. I fell into this idea that I didn't need to do a whole lot via Kickstarter, meaning I could just have a crappy sample and that I just expected everybody to trust me. Just trust me, I'll make it look cool. Like I did with the map books. The everybody that got the map books was totally, for the most part, totally blown away with what they were expecting versus what they got. And one thing that I did totally wrong was expecting that same, if you look at that picture, I'll let me grab this real quick. I'll show you and I'll explain
for
it
people
for those
listening,
just listening.
These scrolls are what caught my eye when I was first introduced to Tanner. This is probably one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So you got this scroll that's 40 foot long. And so you unroll it on your table, you've got your dungeon map. And then as you progress through this map, you just unroll another room. And then you can, perpendicular to that, run another scroll and completely customize your dungeon map as you go, which is just crazy. And the design and the graphics are so spectacular. Like you can tell that a lot of quality has gone into this. So back to you, Tanner, as you're saying, as I'm giving you props on your actual scroll.
Yeah. So I ended up launching with this, and for those listening, it is 3D printed handles. So it basically looks like a Torah. Yeah. I made the map at Kinko's, so it's paper, and it's a foot wide. so it was hideous. But I had this vision of what it would be. And what we ended up with was a 2-foot wide, 20-foot long, beautiful plastic woven scroll with these injection molded handles. So I kind of just wanted everybody to trust me, but that kind of set me up for what I deem as kind of failure. I didn't have the product far enough along to launch on Kickstarter. And I thought, I did it before with Photoshop and people will trust me. And I already have 16,000 backers. We ended up at 5,000 backers with the scrolls,
which is still a lot.
And there was like 10% crossover from the first campaign.
Wow. I would have thought there would have been a higher crossover.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you look at business in general, right, that is usually success's worst enemy is prior success. And typically people who are successful, in a task, launching a new product, or maybe put something into the marketplace, and it goes extremely well. Your mind isn't very good at reminding you of all the work that went into getting that first success. And, in this case is a perfect example, right? Where you assume that, okay, I've got this platform, it's just going to carry over. And some of the regrets might have been not going back and repeating some of the things you did the first time around. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think totally. Also, to be fair, the campaign still did like 600 grand between
it still did really well.
Kickstarter, and the pledge manager. Yeah. But I think what really hurt us is two things. It wasn't a super good product market fit. I keep using that word. I think that the product was cool, but it was more niche for people that just wanted to play through a dungeon. Whereas the map book could be way more versatile. The scrolls kind of suffered from come with me and play my story rather than kind of create your own. And that's not really what lies at the essence of D&D. Now, I completely disagree with those people because I feel like the scrolls can be used the same way as the map books. If you just need a little section, open it. You don't have to play it all the way through. And that was a very hard thing to explain. A lot of my time was spent on Facebook on our ads, not arguing with people, but being like, well, look, you could just open it and use a section rather than push through the whole thing. And people would kind of get it. We ended up doing, of the 600 grand total, we ended up doing almost 400 grand in the first 48 hours.
Wow.
And that was February 2nd. And February 3rd or 4th, the WHO declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. And for the next 20 days, we were losing money. We had people pulling their pledges. I messaged every single person that pulled their pledge.
Yeah.
And 99% across the board was COVID scary. We don't know what the future holds. We spent a lot of money on this campaign. This will go a long way for our family. And so I was super understanding, like, I don't know what the future holds. I even send an update just like, hey, if you don't feel comfortable, get your money back, because we don't know there's so much uncertainty around it. And then luckily the stimulus dropped with like 2 days left, and we did like 100 grand on the last day because the stimulus checks went out.
Did you use Green Inbox for the second campaign as well?
Yeah. And so I got to give Green Inbox and Iran all the credit there. And he's so funny. I never have good assets. I don't have a good media kit. I need to just bring somebody on that can help me do that. I just have I like to do the product and the ideas. Yeah. And so he's like, listen, we need more stuff. We need more stuff. And what he was able to throw together with the very limited assets that he had, to then turn around and do 400 grand in the first 48 hours is just insane. But I was working with Green Inbox on that one, like 2 or 3 months before we clicked launch.
Were you doing pre-marketing with Green Inbox, or were you doing pre-launch ads at all? Or
pre-launch. So we did a little bit of Manychat. We did a little bit of email, Facebook Messenger subscription. We did a little bit of email collection. We did a little bit of Kickstarter page. You can kind of do a pre-launch page where you can click to be notified. And I think that's super key. Kind of going back just to give some value to your listeners. I think one of the most important things you can do is, aside from making sure your product fits in the ecosystem, if you have an idea, And even if it's a game just for little kids, there's other ways to do it. You can license your product by attending any of the trade shows. All the major players are there, and they license hundreds of products a year. It's not as hard as people think. But if your product is a good fit, Kickstarter is a great place. The biggest thing you can do is spend about 80% of your effort and time before you ever click launch. That's having a good media kit, trying to build a base. One thing that I did really well in successfully building this base and this fan base and this community is involving them in the process. So I have a private Facebook group that is reserved for my backers of both campaigns, those that, and I would be nowhere without them. I'm constantly throwing ideas over the fence. But what that creates is it creates this loyalty where not only this loyalty, but these consumers and these customers and these fans feel this obligation to share the campaign when it goes live because they were a part of the process. So I'll message my backers and say, what do you guys think about this map, or what maps would you like to see in future iterations? And I'm sure to constantly be in communication with them. I'm very active on the page. And then when the campaign goes live, there's so many people, thousands of people are sharing it saying, hey, look what I was a part of. I picked this map. I helped design this map. I helped pick this cover. And it just creates a real solid community that I think is totally key. 80% of your effort should be before you ever launch. 20% is after, 80% before.
So on that note, where do you go from here? What's next on the horizon? You got another Kickstarter coming up, I believe. What is this Kickstarter all about that you have? Is it launching next week? Is it next Monday?
It launches October 26th on Monday. Yeah.
Perfect. And more D&D, or what's the focus?
Yeah, so this is another map book. I had to get special permission from Kickstarter because I actually haven't fulfilled the scroll campaign yet.
Okay.
We are going to fulfill on time. I gave a very detailed timeline. We're going to fulfill on time, and next year there's 5 or 6 ideas. We're going to try to be doing about a Kickstarter every 2 months, and I had to get this one out this year or there wasn't going to be room for next year.
So how'd you do that? Did you send them an email saying, hey, I need your help. Here's the situation.
Yeah. So Kickstarter will shut you down if they think that you're just scamming people or running another campaign without fulfilling. But we ended up talking to Anya, who's the games director at Kickstarter. We showed her, videos from our factory. We showed her invoices and had to basically prove to Kickstarter that, number one, our manufacturing is nearly done. 2, it's all paid for. Fulfillment is all figured out and we're going to ship on time. And then they were like, all right, you guys can run another campaign. And the scariest thing for me was messaging all my scroll backers and being like, look, this next one may not be for you. And I hope nobody gets upset that I'm doing another one, but I have too many ideas I want to do next year.
Yeah.
And I gotta start pumping these out. And I just had somebody on the Kickstarter today, on the preview page for the new one, say something along the lines of, I hate that you're launching another one. Let's see. He said, I know I don't normally back a creator's project unless I've received my reward, but I believe in you. So I'm definitely backing this new one too.
Wow. That's high praise.
That's cool. It's fostering that community, taking care of your customers. Before we did the scrolls, I spent about $5,000 and replaced every single damaged book, tracked down every single person that didn't fulfill their pledge manager, and hit almost 100% fulfillment from the first campaign. And I try to take care of everybody as they come through. And I think that's just created this trust where now I can show something off and have multiple Kickstarters running at the same time. And
so give us a preview. What is it? What is this next Kickstarter? I'm here with anticipation. What is it?
Yeah. So it's back to the basics. It's more similar to the first map book.
All right.
Than the scrolls. So it's a book of maps that's the same size as the first book, but all of these maps are not bound. So
it's like a portfolio then, is it? Like they come out? Can you pull one out? Can we see this?
Yeah, it's got a magnetic flap. It's got 40 maps this time. So the book only had 30.
Are they double-sided as well? Can they flip?
Yeah, they're double-sided. So basically what the cool part about this is you're able to pull it out, you'll have 40 maps, 20 pages double-sided, and I'll just show you the back of the book right here. You can put all the maps together and kind of build a dungeon as you go.
Oh, that's cool.
So this to build this, what you would need like a 600 square foot room, and you'd have to be playing on the floor.
Yeah.
To use all the maps together. But
what's the size of that tile? So the people listening, like people watching, can see that that was huge. It's
yeah,
folded
each
in the
map
portfolio.
is 22 inches by 17 inches. It's
Wow.
almost 2 square feet.
Wow.
And so at 40 maps, you're at about 80 square feet. So maybe not a 600 square foot bedroom, but to have everybody in there comfortably and playing on the full dungeon that they're able to build. But what was cool is the map books, I sold a lot of doubles. So a lot of people bought 2 so they could put them together.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of took it a step further and just like, what if we didn't bind it? And we could, now you buy 1 and you could put 20 maps together. And so that was kind of the idea there. We're launching with 3 books. This one has been taken way further than the scrolls. Lesson learned. I got a lot of good product photography. We're launching with, I think I have about 40 maps drawn of the 120 that I'm hoping to do.
Okay.
Again, I think that involving the community is super important. So as the Kickstarter's going, backers will be able to pick and choose and vote and throw out ideas on what they want to see in the next books. And so it's just kind of created just a cool, different environment where the customer is far more than that and gets to be heavily involved in the ideation. And
so
I think
somebody,
go
I
ahead.
was going to say, if somebody wants to back this, so how do they back this? So if somebody wants to find you on Kickstarter next week, how best do they find?
So this will be called the Immersive Battle Atlas.
Okay. Easier way, maybe just go to yarrostudios.com. You'll have a link on there.
Yarrostudios.com. Yeah, we'll throw the link up on Monday.
And so spell that. That's YARRO studios.com. And they go there. They'll be able to get a link that'll take them then to the Kickstarter page. Yeah.
Yep. That's it.
Perfect. Hey, you have been a wealth of knowledge. I would love to have you come back again for a round 2. Some of our guests come back for round 2 and we can't get through everything in a half hour. Maybe after you launch this next campaign, love to even go through like a top, 5 top 10 learning. I know you did a video after your last campaign. I think it was back last fall.
Oh, don't tell people about that. I don't want people
I saw it. It's hilarious because it's top 10, but you gave 9. But then you fully admitted that you had 9 in the video, which is kind of funny the way you kind of you cut it all together, and it was fun.
I got some flack for that. I posted that before fulfilling the first book, so nobody had any reason to trust me, and I got just torn apart. People were like, "Stop making videos, finish the project." But now that we've done that, we can mess with other stuff.
That's good video. You know what? The number one thing you put in there was build the community, and you said it again today. So, I think anytime you can share any knowledge to people, it's a good thing, right? There's nothing wrong with letting people know, here's what's working for me before your campaign's even done. There's so many people out there that are looking to get into this game, and they may not know where to start, or they might be stuck with something. So
I would say get involved. Join as many Facebook groups that are dedicated to creating games, and then get involved. Like, honestly, you can't fake it. If you're so many people are trying to get into the Kickstarter game and they're trying to fake it.
Yeah.
There are these kids with money that are trying to do what's trending. How many masks, COVID-19 masks, have launched in Kickstarter in the last 20 days, and even in board games, I feel like you can tell when the person creating the campaign is just trying to capitalize on this hot new trend of board games. And so get involved with the communities, build your own community. Don't fake it. I think transparency is key. One thing that I did really well during the campaign was owning up to my mistakes. I had people all the time being like, "Hey, you screwed this up." And I was just like, "You're totally right. I screwed it up." And you'd be surprised how, if you're just quick to admit your mistake and fix it, people are so much more forgiving. Then how many Kickstarter campaigns have you backed where there's delays and you haven't heard from the creators? Before people find out about delays, I'm the one that lets them know. And I'm like, "Hey, look, I screwed this up and everything's being pushed back a week, but I'm going to figure it out." And it's been so game changing for me, to where everybody's very understanding. They're just like, "You know what? We get it. Thanks for letting us know." So take care of your people, because that's what the game is all about.
Absolutely. Well, once again, congratulations on all your success. Thanks for coming on our podcast. I appreciate it. And all the best with your upcoming campaign. You take care.
Right on, James. Have a good one.
Cheers.